I was looking for answers, not exits. And I think that that's hard for some Christians to deal with because we get a little afraid and we hold on to it. New thought, it's already in your churches. It's sitting right next to you. Like, it's in the pews. No, to me, when I read that, I'm like, oh, that's the Christ speaking. The Christ is the way, the truth, and the life. Nobody gets to the Father, to God, except through the Christ.
On today's show, we're having Melissa over on my channel. Melissa is a Christian apologist. She is a Christian teacher, a YouTuber, of course. Her ministry started as a departure from the New Age and has gone into many things like skits and teachings and so much more. And I'd like to thank you so much for coming to my channel.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. It's nice to finally connect. Tim has actually helped me with my channel, so that should say something about, your expertise as well. But no, I appreciate you having me on and that we finally get to connect.
Yeah, of course. So, all right. So here's what I want to do is I'm asking you to give me a 30-second gospel presentation. I will put a timer on, but if you run over, it's okay.
Okay.
But if you don't get it in the first 30 seconds, they might, we'll see what happens. Sorry.
Okay. This is fun.
All right. So whenever you're ready.
Okay. My gospel presentation in 30 seconds. Okay.
And
so the gospel isn't necessarily what you do to be made right with God. It's recognizing what's already been done for you. Because people don't think there's not millions of religions in the world. There's two, and there's do and done. And it's believing in Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior, knowing that he took the penalty for you so that you recognize what he has already done so that you can be made right with God. Is that good?
Oh, yeah, under 30 seconds too.
That was hard. There's so much more to say with that.
Yeah, I mean, that's why, like just reading the Bible, like I like to look at like Peter's message of the gospel in the book of Acts, and he goes on for a little bit, giving his presentation. Mm-hmm. So
you need at least a solid minute to 3 minutes to be like, recognize that. To recognize that you're a sinner in need of a savior, and then you believe on Jesus in order to be saved. But it's like, what does that even mean? You can't even get there yet. So, yeah.
All right, awesome. All right, so my perspective on your YouTube channel, I think the reason me and 270,000 other people love your channel and approach your content is it's wholesome.
Oh,
and you're not afraid to touch the more, I guess, controversial topics or things that are a little bit more like, like the video you just released about MLMs. It's like, especially within the Christian, subcultures, I think that is something that people might, feel like it's almost like prickly. It's like, oh, maybe don't touch on that. But what I really appreciate is your genuine approach and honesty and God-fearing, your desire to please God above all, and not being afraid to offend with the spirit of love. I think that's the difference, where some people, they get really into offending because they like, feeling self-righteous and have that, indignation. But on the other hand, I think it's so important to speak on important topics and pray that it pierces right to the heart of these people.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I appreciate that.
So who would you say is most of your audience, or who have you heard from the most in your experience?
As far as who watches my channel, I always say that my channel is kind of a mixed bag. So you have people who either didn't know about New Age, didn't know about New Thought, want to know more about apologetics. What I've noticed is that people are really confused. And so I think whenever they find people that say things that they are thinking, but they're afraid to say it out loud, I think that's part of it too. And, what you said before, I think a lot of it has to do with having a very strong conviction of what's true. And I think if we know that and we understand what truth is, and isn't it so weird, Tim, that we're having to actually have conversations about what truth is now? But if we know that, like it keeps you really grounded. And if you know the difference between right and wrong and what's true and not true, especially when it comes to God and morality. It's hard not to see what not to say, if that makes sense. Like in other words, like you can, it's hard to stay quiet,
Yeah.
and just kind of think, oh, this is too controversial. I'm like, no, this isn't controversial. If it's not true,
Hmm.
then we should be speaking up for what's true in a thoughtful and loving way. So I think that people that follow me generally are they love truth and they love apologetics.
Okay, so coming out of that controversial things you were just saying, coming to Christ, like say, what was it like growing up? Did you
Mm.
have like a godly influence in your life, or was it something that you came to God later on?
Yes and no. So it's something that people will hear more about this in the next year, but I need to clarify something about my growing up. As I've always said that I come from a new age household. That's not entirely true. Um, it's actually a new thought household. And I'll hash that out a little bit here in a little bit if we get into it. But uh, I grew up hearing about Jesus, about the Bible, about God. So, yeah, I mean, I grew up with these Christianese terms. I think I had a godly influence in my mother. I would think that we would disagree as far as hashing out spiritual meanings about what the Bible says. She has a very new thought perspective on it, and I have a very, oh, you read it like it's a 2,000-year-old Jewish history book perspective. Like you read it in context, right? You read it through the lens of the author that was trying to express it, and so there's differences there in that regard. However, I would not say I was saved though. Until I was around 16 years old, I had a crisis and it was bad. Like I was suicidal. It was a very, very dark place that I was in. And I probably wouldn't have been alive in a week or two after this particular conversation I had with a friend. I went to a party. I went to a party of all places. And one of my friends there, he was just telling everybody about Jesus. He just got saved. And I was just listening to what he was saying, and it was what really penetrated my spirit was that there's nothing that you can do that God won't forgive. It was like the first time, I don't know what it was about hearing that, but I'm all, man, I'm not a good person. Like, I mean, you have to kind of break it down. And I remember the moment I looked down and it was like something happened in my heart and in my mind. And I don't remember going home and I don't remember even going to sleep, but I remember waking up the next day. And it was as simple as I can put it. I remember sitting up in bed, not knowing who that person was yesterday. And I mean this in a very literal sense. I felt reborn. I didn't even know anything about the Bible, what it said about new creation, new birth, nothing. But that is literally what I felt like. That things smelled different. Light was brighter. Colors were brighter. There were things that I wanted to do and not to do. Well, I didn't want to cuss anymore. I didn't want to drink. I didn't want to think things that were immoral, all on my own. And I felt like I was like in a like Snow White in a Disney movie. I was so peaceful. It was just this peace was overwhelming. I'm like, oh, I want more of this. What is this? More, 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 more. I had an insatiable hunger for the Bible. And I remember actually turning on the TV trying to find televangelists. Like I was so hungry. I didn't know, I didn't care where I got it from at that point. I was just so happy and so just free. And from there on, it's a whole second part two of the story. But that's my general when I got saved story.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very similar to even Ray Comfort's story. He actually shared his, I guess, part of his testimony for the first time on De La Fe, where he talks about how he got into, I think it was like psilocybin or some kind of mushrooms, and he was in a very young age, and that like opened his mind in such a scary way that
Mm,
he was able to, and he said he hid it out of shame in part of his testimony for such a long time, but he
interesting. I never knew that.
oh yeah, he just had recently just talked about that maybe a few months ago,
Mm,
but he had mentioned how this experience so shook him, and that's really what ultimately led him to Christ in a profound way, and outside of the the drugs and stuff, he was saying how it was such a shattering of his world of coming to Christ. Or it's that same thing of like, things didn't, my senses didn't feel the same.
Yeah.
Yeah, my upbringing is a little bit different. I just grew up in Christianity, so I always felt like, oh, my testimony is boring because I just like, I'm like, I just was raised in Christianity, and my parents, just had it all together. Um, but yeah, wow. So, and that's actually something you said was that like you for the first time really seeing like where you were at in that moment when that guy was sharing essentially the gospel. I think that's what's so important about not shying away from showing our us like that we're sinners. I think so many Christians shy away from
Mhm.
that part of evangelism, but I think you can't evangelize without having that core component that healthy people don't need a doctor.
Mhm.
As Jesus
Yeah.
says, like, you are sick, you need to be healed. There's
Mhm.
no other way you can be saved but by Christ, and Christ came to heal the sick. So, and we are sick in our soul
Mhm.
with this, like, this cancer of death, and only Christ can heal us from that. And that's such a pull out of a pit where you're like, I'm not beyond hope. I'm not beyond saving. That so
Mhm.
many people need to hear, and that's incredible that he was able to share that in that moment for you.
Yeah, and he didn't even actually mean to do it. He was just there and said a sentence. God could have used anybody, and he
Yeah.
wasn't sober. You know what I
Yep.
mean? I think that it's if anything, it wasn't him. It was God's providence.
Yep.
It
Yep.
was him. Yeah, it was me responding in that moment, believing. I believed, and I wanted more of it. And from that was really where it ended, though. As far I went like I call it the honeymoon with God after you get saved.
Yeah.
You're I was on cloud. It was like the best summer of my life. I still look back at this summer after I got saved as the best time in my life. It was amazing. I was just a new person. I felt like, oh man, this is me. Like I can actually be me. I like who I am, and there was an acceptance there that I'd never known before. And it was kind of at this point, though, around 3 months, though, I never knew what apologetics was or anything like that, but I wanted to know more, but nobody could give me more, right? Like I wanted to know. I'm like, okay, well, what is this Bible about? Like I don't understand this. I don't understand the Bible, and I got rebuked for that. And somebody was like, well, you need to repent. I'm like, of what? Like, can you explain this to me then? Like, no? Okay. Man, what do I do here then? I was this teenager, snot-nosed teenager, didn't really know much about anything. And I had hard questions, apologetic questions that Christians have been asking for thousands of years, and nobody could answer them. And this is really where it gets muddy because I grew up in a New Thought household, which is like metaphysical Christianity, and it looks and sounds Christian on a very intellectual level. Like you're talking metaphysics, you're talking philosophy, you're talking what's the word? It's like the science of physics, quantum
Quantum
physics.
mechanics.
Yeah, yeah. Like they talk so. Wow, you guys really know. And there's books on my shelf that I grew up with that would be considered New Thought. I didn't even know there was a word for this. I had no idea. I thought it was more spiritual Christianity. I thought it was higher Christianity. It was like, wow, you guys are I'm going to go over here to these guys cuz they look like they dare to think. They dare to think about things. While it looks like the church, wherever I was going to church, there's like an anti-intellectual strain.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody wants to grapple with thinking, and I had a big problem with that. I still do. Even in hindsight, I'm like, oh, I get myself, I get old self, I get you, I understand you now. Because like there's no critical analysis of certain thing, and I love truth, right? So we started the whole thing with that, is that there's this love for truth that I have, and if it's true, well, we should want to know that. And so that's really what it was in a pursuit of. And To give people an understanding of New Thought, people, you may not think you know what that is, but you do. Think of Oprah, Joel Osteen. People think New Age, Oprah's New Age. She is not. She is not New Age. She is New Thought. And you have Joel Osteen, who people are like, something's off with him. He's Word of Faith. Yes, he's Word of Faith, but he is inherently more New Thought. The reason why Christians have trouble pulling them apart is because it looks and sounds Christian. Oprah calls herself a Christian. A lot of New Agers, they do not call themselves Christian. So what's going on here? What's happening? And if we look at the people that she's interviewed, you will have an idea of what New Thought is. In fact, the book that Oprah read was by a man named Eric Butterworth that radically changed her life. She grew up Christian until she read this book, talking about Christianity and Jesus. And wow, I never knew this about the Bible and God. I like this. This is really good. This is very tolerant. This is very open. This is much better. I like this Christianity. And that was a New Thought author. All right. And so we're having these, this pseudo religion, if you will, that takes the Bible. And if I were to phrase New Thought in a sentence, I would say it's metaphysical Christianity, but it's the positive thinking movement in America that makes your thoughts power and makes Jesus its mascot. So Jesus is the example, literally, of what can happen if you control your mind to its fullest potential. It's not a religion. It's a movement, a philosophical, I would say maybe more philosophical, but a movement within America. It's interwoven throughout the fabric of society, and we don't realize it, but it looks and sounds Christian.
Yeah, I've heard some big preachers, they almost start injecting that, like, it's usually when they start talking about what Messiah means, it's like almost like that little God theology, I think, where it's like you can become a God. Ultimately it's Mormonism, and but it's infested itself into like mainstream Christianity, where they're almost deifying Christ, or Jesus, and saying, well, these labels can also specifically and directly apply to you. It's like,
you're exactly right. Yeah.
And
Yeah,
that's
and
what's
like
so scary.
That's the whole Word of Faith movement is something we could have a whole talk about. But what makes the Word of Faith movement what it is, a third of the Word of Faith movement is New Thought. Mm-hmm. So when I got into these teachings, and the long story short with the second part of my story is that I was in these for a long time and went to church. Like, I went to a Christian church for like over 10 years. And I'm believing these beliefs, thinking they're Christian, just super spiritual Christianity, right? It sounded really good. I was very progressive too. There's a vein with that as well. I just wouldn't have known that at the time. And I'm going to church, and I'd never read my Bible. And what I did read of it, I saw through different goggles, and that's a whole other thing. But it was after I had my first child, I started thinking, okay, I still have these questions though. After all these years, I'm like, I still kind of don't understand this or that or whatever. And at the time I was into the law of attraction. Have you ever heard of that? Mm-hmm. Yeah. From like The Secret that blew up a few years ago. That's nothing new. Like, I grew up with those beliefs. Your thoughts become things is a staple New Thought teaching. That is New Thought. And the thing is that 2 Jehovah's Witnesses came to my door, and my beliefs at the time were, everybody believes in God just in their own way. All religions have truth in them. We need to respect all religion. Just, you know what I mean? It was pretty religious, pluralistic in that way, where as long as you believe in God, you're good, and Jesus was just part of that. I always made some sort of way to make it all fit. And in hindsight, of course, if somebody had challenged me, I would have really had to wrestle with that, but nobody challenged me. And so I think that's part of it, is I wasn't forced to think about it until I had two Jehovah's Witnesses show up at my door. And I thought I attracted them to me, Tim. I thought that I used the law of attraction. It was so ironic. But I'm like, okay, you know what? They're here. Let me ask them. I had no idea what they believed or that they were, in essence, a textbook cult, right? I had no idea that what they believed was so far off of even what I would have considered to be biblical at the time. Like, my biggest thing was Jesus being Michael the archangel. I'm like, where do you guys get that for? That doesn't make any sense. There's no way they believe that. That's too out there. No, it's a rumor. People don't know what they're talking about. Oh no, they did. That's what they believe. They believe that Jesus is Michael the archangel. And when they confirmed that, I felt the Holy Spirit like I'd never felt in a long time. Just this urgency to go to what I call their worst enemy, which is the internet. You're not supposed to do that. You're not supposed to go on the internet and research about Jehovah's Witnesses if you're a Jehovah's Witness. And I exactly did that. Blew the roof off for me. I researched. This is how I got into ministry, was into counter cult ministry, was by researching Jehovah's Witnesses. However, it was very safe for me at the time, because in researching that religion, I discovered, oh man, if the Jehovah's Witnesses are wrong and the Bible is right, that means Jehovah's Witnesses are wrong. However, if this is right and true about the Bible, that means I'm wrong. And it was like there was a syncretistic dance going on there of me very, very much being humbled. And it wasn't until I read something about the serpent's lie. I'd never heard that before. I had never heard of the first lie told to mankind, that you can be divine. Now, mind you, New Thought teaches that's the core essence of New Thought, is that humanity is innately divine. Jesus was the example. Christ, we as Christians hear that and think, oh, Jesus and Christ, that's the same person. Not to them. The Christ consciousness is something that Jesus obtained, and so can you. You can be divine, just like Jesus was. See how messed up that is? Like, I'm the way, the truth, and the life. Nobody comes to the Father except through me. Christians are like, yeah, man, it's a slam dunk verse. No, to me, when I read that, I'm like, oh, that's the Christ speaking. The Christ is the way, the truth, and the life. Nobody gets to the Father, to God, except through the Christ. And you would agree with that if I said that. It's real messy, man. So I believed that. I believed it was biblical, that we had this divinity, and Jesus, this is what he came here to teach. The law of attraction, our thoughts having power. We are elevated to this Godhood in this divine essence of man, of humanity. And so when I read that about Satan's lie to humans, I was like, oh, no, what have I done? And it was so humbling. I took a step back. I studied the Bible. I researched. I looked into these other religions, Mormonism, Jehovah's Witnesses. I'm like, oh, this is not what I thought it was. And it was like my eyes were opened. And that was in 2011. I had been in ministry for 5-6 years, maybe, until so many years. I can't even, I'd have to do the math. But it was a long time that I was in this ministry, learning about cults, about logic, learning the Bible, before I really got into what I do now. So that's a whole thing. But that's part two, but also to explain more about my journey and a little bit more about New Thought.
I guess let me just jump off on a point that you were talking about there.
Sure.
Right at the end. So you're mentioning, it's almost like Satan can't help himself with like injecting this in every other man-made religion. It's that man can become God, or man is equal to God, or like it's right in Genesis.
Or it's elevation of man. It's demoting God and elevating man. Absolutely, yeah.
It's like this deep evil within Satan that is like he has to de-elevate God. He has to bring him down so that we can ourselves raise up. And it's when you see it, like you see it everywhere. Like you were saying, like it's in Jehovah's Witnesses, it's in Mormonism, it's in all these other religions. And then the other aspect is that God can't come close to us. And
Hmm.
that's, I feel like it's all the other half of religions, if not all of the other ones, where it's, you have Islam where God is so far off, or even deism where God is so far off you can't even touch or approach him. But
Hmm.
the Word of God says, boldly approach the throne. And that God inclines his ear towards us. That's something I've always gotten peace from reading the Psalms, where it says that God will incline his ear towards us when we are seeking him earnestly. And it's like, oh, God is putting effort into hearing me, hearing my cry and my prayer.
Hmm.
Um, and yeah, so humbling to see that the God of the universe inclines his ear. And ultimately, I would say that's what Jesus did by coming down. Um, and dying on the cross he was inclining his ear towards humanity. Um, so
That's good.
you said you grew up in New Thought,
Hmm.
and you had this kind of moment of salvation when you were 16.
Hmm.
What was pulling you constantly back into New Thought? Or what was really like the friction that you just could not let go of until those moments where you just realized? Um, do you think there
What
were
it,
like things that were just holding you down?
yeah, what it was, and I went over this a little bit before, and I made a video about this because the biggest problem was actually Christians. They just didn't think. They didn't want to answer my questions. They didn't know. They didn't know what they believed or why they believed it. And at that time, I mean, the internet wasn't what it was now, right? Like there was no this. There was no ministries online. It wasn't what it was. I didn't know about Lee Strobel, for example. He wrote a book back a long time ago, Case for Christ. That would have been a good read for me, but I didn't know about that. But my biggest draw, my biggest attraction to it was it looked like they were smarter. It looked like they knew and they welcomed. And when I say they, I'm talking about the general disposition towards questioning about spirituality. That, like, yeah, it's great. Ask all the questions you want. I mean, there's a catch to it. I get that now. But whereas over here, it's like, oh no, you're making people stumble in their faith. And I was like a pariah for just asking general questions. And I think I understand now why that was a problem. And it was just because they didn't know what they believed. And they were afraid. And I understand that now. I don't think that that's an excuse, it's a reason. But I was looking for answers, not exits. And I think that that's hard for some Christians to deal with because when we have a posture of, especially now, where we have this deconstruction movement, we have progressive Christians, we have all kinds of stuff. We get a little afraid and we hold on to it. My attitude, I guess, is a little different. Where I'm like, okay, well, is what they believe true? That's why truth should be so sought after. I believe critical thinking, studying the scriptures, knowing it really well, and being like, well, hold on a second. What about this? Oh, you believe that about God. Okay, that explains why you believe what you do. You don't actually believe truth can be known. Oh. And so a lot of it is just asking questions of an understanding other people's perspective and then doing the work and just kind of thinking, oh, I understand why they believe what they do. I get that. And because they have that view on truth is why they can believe some wiggity whack things about scripture. Oh, okay. So it's like it should be where that's, I hate to use the word, maybe for lack of a better word, a relief, maybe, where it's like, oh, okay, I know that I can stand on what's true then. There, if what they believed correlated to reality, I'd have to wrestle with that, but it doesn't because they don't believe in that, in that way. So that's a whole other thing, but that's what I
Yeah,
thought I was doing. Yeah.
one of my favorite quotes and just teaching styles from Jeff Durbin in his apologetics ministry is just asking, what do you mean by that? Like, what
Yeah.
do you mean by that? Just like
Greg
getting to
Kokel
that.
is the same thing. Greg Kokel
Yeah.
is like the goat when it comes to this kind
And
of stuff.
I think like especially talking with Mormons and Jehovah's Witnesses, you guys saying like a lot of the same terminology. Like,
Mhm.
oh, the Holy Spirit helped us. I'm like, but who do who is the Holy Spirit to you?
Yes.
Who
Yes.
is Jesus to you? What do you mean by Jesus? What do you mean by a conviction? Is it a burning on the bosom? Is it what are these things that you're saying? What they actually mean to you?
Mhm.
Because and I think a lot of people do it deceptively, where they're like, "Oh no, we're on the same playing field. We're on this. We're right. We're all on the same ground here. No need to dig in deeper." It's like,
Mhm.
let's pause. Let's. What do you actually mean by these things you're saying?
Yeah. And we
And
shouldn't get angry about that. I think that anger
mhm,
is like it's a guard, especially, I mean, I'm a woman, so I'm saying this as a woman, but especially a lot of women. They get very, we get very upset and defensive. I'm positive men get that way too, but in my field, it's something where it's like, hey, ladies, this is not an attack. Wrestle with it.
yeah,
Ask them questions. That's my challenge. Is that, well, okay, a Mormon's talking about the Holy Ghost. Well, what do they mean by that? How does the Holy Ghost speak to them? Jehovah's Witnesses, Holy Spirit, lowercase hs, same words. What does that mean? Somebody that has pseudo spirituality beliefs talks about the Holy Spirit. What do they mean by that? Where are they getting it from? Gather your information, have a posture of a student, and get them to think for themselves. And in the process, getting you to think for yourself. Like I think when we get angry, I think it should tell us a lot about what we know. And I've gotten angry, you know what I mean? Like I'm not sitting here saying I'm perfect, but I think that that's a blind spot for me. I'm like, oh, okay, I should probably explore this a little bit more. Why am I getting defensive over this? Let's
mhm.
look at this. And so instead of running from it, you kind of have to lean into it.
Yeah. I think people don't like feeling insecure, and I
Yeah.
think
Hmm.
that's where I've seen a lot of people just get angry when it's like they start to feel unsure of themselves or their
Yeah.
beliefs, and to them it's almost like it's like the Matrix, like which pill do you want to take? Like some people,
Hmm.
they'll take that blue pill all day long, and by you showing them like there's reality here. It's like just peer through this little lens and you'll actually see
Hmm.
reality. But they refuse and they'll fight you just to make
Hmm.
sure that they don't actually see it as it is, because people feel comfortable living in the lie.
Hmm.
And and
And they think it's truth, and that's the worst part,
yeah,
is that that's it's really difficult to talk to somebody that's speaking about truth but doesn't believe truth can be known. Like it's
yeah,
a little frustrating.
yeah, that's something I grew up with. I had a very, very strict sense of morality and right and wrong, black and white. Like, my father was a detective in New York City for 20 years.
Mm.
Um, and both my parents had always had a very, very strong convictions. And so, for that, growing up, I always believed there is right and there is wrong, and you have to fight for the truth.
Hmm.
Truth is truth. You can't change it. And for me, I'm like, it doesn't help me or do me any good to mask truth, because like I've said in a video before, I'm like, you cannot interpret your way out of hell. There's no interpretation you can create, like as an example, like in regards to homosexuality, where it's like, no, well, that's your interpretation. I'm like, your interpretation doesn't then get you out of God's judgment. Like, you have to pursue truth, and truth is what saves us. It's that's why Jesus says, I'm the way, the truth, and the life. um, and when we have that foundation of truth, that we pursue truth, that means we pursue Christ in everything, and we see clearly, we're able to see clearly, where everyone else might not be able to.
Hmm.
So so you said you were led out by this conversation essentially with these Jehovah's Witnesses, and that really caused, I would say, that insecurity inside of you, and which led you to just pursuing truth genuinely.
Hmm. Hmm.
Who are some of your biggest lifelines, do you think? I know you talked about some books and some apologists. Like, do you have people in your life that were like really pulling you out of it as well, or would you say it was mostly apologetics?
That's a good question. When I first realized that what I believed was unbiblical, but I thought it was Christian, I was embarrassed, number one. But number two, nobody understood what I had gone through, especially in my church. That was a lonely road for a while. because I was trying to figure it out still, but I couldn't figure out how could I have gone to church for like a decade and not believed that I had no idea that what I believed was basically heretical but blasphemous. How did that happen? So that caused me to pause greatly at my church because this is not a this is a good it's a good church. It's a biblical church. So what's going on there? Number one. Number two, when I try to explain to people what it was that I had believed, either they had no interest or they didn't know what I was talking about. That was frustrating. But number three, my lifeline, if I had to say, wasn't ex New Agers or ex New Thoughters, which I probably should differentiate. I needed to explain those two things in a minute, but it was ex Jehovah's Witnesses and ex Mormons. Some of the most wholesome, most fantastic ministries that honestly deserve more of a platform than what I have taught me so much about people skills, how to reach the lost, how to listen. They taught me so much critical thinking. I'm still friends with these people to this day, but listening to them, even talk to a Jehovah's Witness or a Mormon, if they're a former Mormon, with such love and concern, but also understanding their language, taught me so much. It was a great foundation for everything that I do today. And so that I would say that as far as my struggle with like I was probably more 80% New Thought, maybe 20% New Age. And I need to explain, this is very important. There's a difference between New Thought and New Age. They are not the same thing. And I called myself an ex-New Ager for years, and I'm actually still okay with that definition because a lot of New Thought informs a lot of New Age beliefs. But as there are two separate buckets. So if I were to describe New Age, think of chakras, yoga, astrology, tarot cards, psychic readings, more things like that they go in their own bucket. All right. And there's a whole list that I could give of things that are inherently new age. New Thought is very different. Think of manifestation, visualizing, positive thinking in a metaphysical sense. There's nothing wrong with being an optimist. But when you think your thoughts can control the universe, when you think your thoughts and words can create reality, that's a line that's crossed. They both believe in inner divinity. But New Thought basically take every Christian concept and put a metaphysical definition to it. You have New Thought. All right. So it's Christianized. And I believe that New Thought will deceive Christians before the New Age ever will. Right? The New Age is a frontal attack. We recognize that as Christians. New Thought, it's already in your churches. It's sitting right next to you. Like it's in the pews. And so if we listen and we're hearing something that sounds Christian and we don't quite understand what the Bible teaches about it, it's like, okay, I know something's off, but I don't know what. Most likely it's one of these teachings, like law of attraction was taught to me that it was a Christian teaching, and there's probably a lot more of a list that I could give. Christ consciousness, that's not New Age, that's New Thought, and so there's a difference between these two. I've never seen it not overlap though at some point. Like astral projection, that's New Age. But somebody might be saying, they were manifesting something that very morning, like they were trying to use the law of attraction to attract something, things like that. And the understanding, and this is where it goes into word of faith territory, is the prosperity gospel itself is inherently New Thought in origin when it comes to you should never be sick. That is a huge beginning of New Thought. Phineas Quimby, he was one of the fathers of New Thought, believed that you could heal yourself with your thoughts through correct thinking. Okay, and so same goes for being prosperous and rich. The self-help movement itself is kind of undergirded on this concept of helping yourself, but also in the beginning anyway, how to be healthy and prosperous through your words and your thoughts. That's a new thought. And so it's all kind of connected in this web that I'm trying to unweb. I have this last year, 2 years now, going on 2 years. I'm like, oh, I see it now. I understand. And it's taken me a lot of growth. It's taken me because when I first got onto online ministry, people would message me and they're like, what do you think about Reiki? I'm like, what's that? I'm like, I don't even know. There are so many new age things I didn't even know was in the new age. I'm like, is this? I never believed that. I didn't even do yoga. I didn't even know that yoga would be considered new age. Um, I knew about chakras and third eye stuff, but I'm like, I never did that. What was I into? What made
Yeah.
this so
So did you have
unique?
to like learn about the new age
Mm-hmm.
later on? Like,
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
that something you've studied more recently then?
Mm-hmm.
Just to
I
actually
can't
be
really
able to
quite
do.
talk about it yet.
Okay.
But yes, I'm sharing as much as I think I'm able to share. Maybe that can be another conversation for another day. But
Sure.
the Stephen Bancarz was big when he first came out he was an ex New Ager who became a Christian. I learned right away. I was like, oh man, like this is, and the way he put things was really eloquent, and I loved his story. But I was like, that's really new age, and it was around that time that I started realizing and toying with the thought of, oh, okay, there's this thing called new thought, but I did not understand until recently. Maybe, well, I say recently, like 2 years ago, maybe that I understood, completely understood, line in the sand. Oh, I get it. I see it. I see this whole thing. And yeah, it became kind of a project.
Mm.
But that I toyed with it for a while until I definitively and intentionally studied it.
Mm. So, talking about ministry, new age, new thought, how
Hmm.
did your actual ministry, at least maybe it started before YouTube, but how did it actually officially start?
You know what's funny is I never know how to answer this question. It officially started in 2011 with Counter Cult Ministry.
Okay.
Officially, that was, I still have a great love for that, and I still cover topics about cults and mind control, and that is my first love in ministry. But online ministry, I actually didn't go looking for it. It kind of found me. I started a Facebook group, and this is kind of a follow up from your question before. I saw a lot of Facebook groups for ex Mormons, ex Jehovah's Witnesses, anything you could think of. I'm like, but there's nothing for ex New Agers. Like there's nothing there. How I really want to connect with people that went through what I went through. I want to know more. I want to share things, and I had learned a lot at that point, and I had so much to share about like, hey man, guys, I understand how we got the Bible. Questions about hell. That's a tough concept. Let's talk about it. And so I had this spirit of apologetics, and in the sense that I felt like I was gifted in that. I wanted to help people. I wanted to serve others very badly. And so I started a Facebook group, and it was in the long story short, it was in sharing with the group that I started making YouTube videos for them, and it just turned into something. I didn't really mean to be like, oh, I want to make it on YouTube. That was not my goal. It was when I made a video though that took off, and I'm like, oh, people actually like what I'm saying. Like they're interested in this stuff, and I've discovered that there's a lot of things that churches are not talking about, that a lot of like online ministries, YouTubers that are great Christians, pastors, teachers, theologians, they are on YouTube, and they are teaching things that a lot of churches, not all, and I'm specifically talking about bigger churches that have like a seeker sensitive model.
Hmm.
They don't touch on deep topics by design, and people are so hungry. They are so hungry to know more. They're desperate, and they're not finding a lot of discipleship in their churches. So, a great outlet for me was YouTube in that regard. And I embraced that. I leaned into that because I had my own frustrations with, hey guys, I really want to, at my church, I'm like, hey, in my church at the time, I really wanted to lean in more to apologetics. I'm like, can we please dig deeper? Let's have a Q&A, right? Like let's get somebody who really knows their Bible and let's get everybody lined up, and it's a big church. I'm positive that people have really tough questions. Let's talk about Jehovah's Witnesses. Let's learn about these tough things. I can't say it was like pulling teeth, but it was tough. And so there was an embracing of that when I discovered, oh, these videos are gaining traction. People really want to know this stuff. They're interested in these topics. And so that's really when I started leaning into it more and kind of found a great outlet on YouTube for what I couldn't do in my church. And I'm enjoying it. I think it's different. I maybe have a different perspective on callings. I don't really see that we're called to things. I see that we're gifted. I think that that's a more biblical view, that we have these giftings, and in those gifts, it's not like God says, boom, I'm calling you to this. I don't think he does that. I think that we're born with these. I can't find that anywhere in the Bible. I think that we're born with these gifts that we yearn to do. And it's when we live out those gifts that we're doing what we're supposed to be doing. And so that's how it feels. I feel that I don't feel like this is me. I feel like this is me serving others.
Yeah.
And doing what God has gifted me in that regard.
Yeah, that's a really good perspective to have. I think a lot of people, and maybe that's it's kind of the fruit of that kind of thinking that you're saying it's not, where people are like, God, what do you want me to do? What's your calling
Yeah.
on my life?
Yeah.
As if God only is calling you to do one thing. Like,
We could
I'm
have a
calling
whole
you
video
to
about
free
this.
the Hebrew people out of the land of Egypt. It's like,
Mhm.
no, those are very
Mhm.
specific things. But even with Moses, it's like he didn't just have Moses do one thing. It
Mhm.
was his whole entire life that God was bringing him through different things, and all the way from Moses all the way to people like Timothy and Philemon, all
Mhm.
these different smaller people in the Bible that God was leading through. And
Mhm.
so I think this almost like this narcissism, if you will, like this like putting yourself into the Bible in a
Mhm.
bad way, because I think there's a good way of doing it, but like
Mhm. Yeah.
putting yourself in a like,
Prescription and
okay, well,
description.
Moses
Yeah.
does this. What is the specific and unique calling God has placed in my life? As opposed to God is calling you to repent and live a life surrendered to Him.
Mhm.
It's not just a one thing He has you to do. It's going to be a million things over the course of your life,
Mhm.
and as God invests in you, as God pulls things and puts things into you, like desires from birth, and even investing in other ways by friendships and showing you like, oh, actually, I want you to do this now. It's like then we really see God's calling in our life, which is just to be obedient to Him and
Mhm.
love everyone like He has loved us. From your own church, did you see any reactions from people? Were they watching your videos, or did they kind of get over their head?
No, some did. But it took a while because really when it started taking off was during COVID. And so everybody was at home.
Mm-hmm.
And the churches were different.
Yeah,
Everybody was
so
trying
like,
to
oh, what's
figure it
Melissa
out.
up to? Let's see what she's
Yeah,
doing. Oh, she's a YouTube channel.
yeah, that was a whole, there's a whole backstory with this. But I decided I need to switch churches, and I did. No regrets. Um, I go to a Calvary, and no regrets. Like I take notes there. You know what I mean? Like I'm really being, yeah, I'm like, oh man, that's good. And I learned something, in that regard. I learned a lot through that whole experience. That was years ago. Again, 4 years ago. But yeah, there's wonderful pastors at this church that I still keep in contact with. And I'm really glad that some of them do watch my videos and think I'm doing a great job, and they're encouraging about it. So that's nice. That's very refreshing and quite lovely, honestly, because that means, okay, people, they do care. Like they do care about, deeper things, cultural issues, good theology, things like that. And so it's encouraging in that regard. Yeah.
So have you seen that your channel has, shifted and evolved over these, few years? Like, and you said you started making videos obviously just for the group, and then now it's for YouTube. And like, I know you did a lot of new age, new thought, like exegetical stuff, but how would you describe your shifting over time, and how have you felt God pulling you in different directions?
It's funny because I always say it's a mixed bag. I have pretty much, I think, done the same stuff. Um, Whether it's, some average satire, so it's pretty average, or if it's something apologetics based, culture based. I have tried to do, it's hard to do, but I love doing street interviews.
Yeah.
I love going out and talking to people. I'm like, you want to talk about God? What do you believe? Why do you believe that? I love that stuff. I love talking. Some people get intimidated, but I'm like, I just want to sit down and talk about spiritual things. And
Have you always been able to do that?
yes,
Or is that something more recently you developed? So
no,
always.
I've always been that way. And that's the thing is that leaning into that was important, especially as a female. Because I mean, you kind of have this stigma in the church where it's like, okay, you can only be in serving ministry or the kids ministry. And I'm like, but I want to like read the Bible. Like I want to go, not teach it. Okay, to be clear, I'm not saying I want to be a pastor or anything, but I had a love to for deep theology, and I didn't fit in a lot. I even have a satire about this. I didn't fit in a lot about with a lot of women's groups. I wanted to dig deeper. I wanted to be challenged. I wanted to talk about deeper things. And I've always been that way. And so it took a while to realize, oh, there's other women like me. Not only that, but this is needed badly in the church, where we challenge each other in this regard. Like you have Natasha Crane, great friends of mine, Natasha Crane, Elisa Childers. Those are just, Hillary Morgan Ferrer, like they're everywhere. And we all care about different things, but we all could probably sit down and geek out over all these things. And I would sit there like a fly on the wall, learning from these women who are brilliant. And Nancy Piercy, Rosaria Butterfield, Allie Beth Stuckey. I mean, you have all these women who are just all in this together, and it's very refreshing. I'm like, okay, I never was alone. I just didn't have the internet at the
Yeah.
time. So I mean, there's that leaning into that the apologetic aspect. I am getting my master's in religious studies. I'm like five or six classes away. I got my bachelor's in religious studies, and I just love learning. I love learning, and I love people. And if I can combine my love for God with my love for people, I mean, I think that that's important to do, especially now, getting people to kind of think about it and challenge me.
Hmm.
So I think that the street interviews part of it, just kind of being with them, asking them questions, which I hope to do more of as time goes on. And the topic of new thought, I am leaning in more to that. I want to just talk about it more so badly, but I can't yet. So, so there's that aspect of it. So I think that's really where my channel will evolve more in what I do in the next, I'd say year or so. I think people will kind of maybe see a shift, but I mean, I don't look at like the algorithm. I don't look at the analytics, things like that. I don't know YouTube land very well. Like I know when a video does good or bad or whatever, but when I like a topic, I'm like, oh, I'm in it. I love this. Let's do a Q&A, guys. What are your questions? And it's kind of, if video does great, great. If it doesn't, I kind of don't care. And I think that's my secret
Yeah. So
sauce. I don't
what
know
does
the
it look
secret
like for
sauce.
you now making videos? Like I know you're a mother and
Mhm.
you're studying, to get your more and more degrees and all stuff like that. Like, has it changed or evolved from its origin? Like, I mean,
Mhm.
I'm assuming some videos are obviously much easier to make than others.
Yeah, that's a
Um,
good question. Yeah, because okay, so when I started this, my kids, let's see, I have an almost 14-year-old, so she was like 9 or 10, and then my youngest is about to be 10. So she was like 5 or 6. So I mean, I had youngish children that still need you. And I think that my secret in that regard is time management, knowing what to say no to, knowing what to say yes to, and being very careful with how you manage your time. Me, anyway. Because I don't skirt around the whole parenting thing. I take it very seriously, spending a lot of time with my kids, listening to them, really just feeding them and putting into them as much as I can, and chopping off time for things like this. I give them a heads up. We homeschool too, right? And so there's a lot of things that go into it. And what they don't realize, what people don't know, and Tim, you might know this. This is the easy part. It's getting it, like if you do a video, you have notes before, you have research before, then you film it, then you edit it. Like, so that takes time. And a lot of that I kind of do on my downtime, maybe at night when the kids are asleep. And that's gotten a lot easier as the kids have gotten older. And I think that's part of how my channel will evolve in that regard, because I'm like, oh, you're more independent. And you're fine with me being away for a little bit, it's like you can hang out. So that's allowed for a little bit more freedom. And then that correlates with what people will see on my channel. Like I was just able to release a 2-hour video on MLMs that people don't realize I was sitting here in my studio filming that for 4 or 5 hours, and it was 2 hours of content. So I was in here like all day. Yeah. And so there was that. But that's what I mean. It's like, oh, okay, I have a little bit more freedom. And so I'm hoping that I'll be able to do more deep dives, ones that I'm interested in. And I love it when it hits me and I'm like, oh yeah, I want to look into this. I have so much fun doing the research and hitting it from all angles. So yeah.
What are some of the non-YouTube things that you've done that have impacted your faith?
I would say going to seminary, getting more involved in my church. That's been wonderful. And writing a book. That took, authors are insane. They're psycho. I finally understand everything that goes into writing a book. And anybody that's written a book, whether I agree with them or not, that's a feat and people that just plow out books. Like Sean McDowell, I swear that guy comes out with a book like every year. And I'm like, he's a machine. I'm like, how do you do this? How do you do this? And so I think that people are gifted in that regard. Me, I don't know. I don't know what kind of author I am yet, but that was big. That was a big thing. It's not here yet, by the way, at the time of this recording. It's not out yet. But there's a growth that happens with that. And speaking. I've started taking on more speaking events, which is a big thing for me because of energy, like personal energy. And I mean that physically, not in like a new age way. I mean physically. It's not something I talk about a lot, but yeah, it's a situation for me to travel and to speak. And so I've been really challenging myself in that regard. I'm like, okay, what can I get away with here? And that has been awesome for my growth, but also knowing my boundaries. I have no problem saying no. But that's what's beautiful about it, is that when I can say yes, it's so good. And I can do it. And I know I can physically handle it. And so that's been really good. So I would say that those, right off the top of my head, those 3 things, or 4 if you count seminary.
Yeah. Now, speaking on YouTube, and kind of like what you're saying about speaking engagements, who are some of your favorite people that you've actually collaborated with? And what are some like big takeaways you've had from those?
That's a hard question.
Yeah, I hope people won't get offended if you don't name them. So
Yeah, no, that's hard. I think by far my favorite interview, as far as fun, was John Cooper. John Cooper was a riot. I was like, oh man, we could hang out. Like he was awesome. Very laid back. and very informative. And as far as, okay, so I'd probably say one of the most important collabs was with Tim Barnett and Elisa Childers with their book, The
Mm-hmm.
Deconstruction of Christianity. I think that is such an important book right now. I would say that, man, it's a hard question. I'd have to like think and go all the way back because I know that if I go through my channel, I'll be like, oh yeah, them. Oh yeah, this. Anything about critical race. You have Monique Dusan, Neil
Mm-hmm.
Shenvi. What I like about interviews in particular is that, especially off camera, because when you're interviewing, you have to have a certain stop and demeanor and things like that. But
Yeah,
man, when
yeah.
you're just on the phone, it's so different because it's you're able to just ask them free questions all on your
Oh
own.
yeah.
um, in that regard. And I think that, Monique, interviewing her about critical race theory, that has been a topic. Deconstruction and critical race theory, or critical theory in general, is a fascinating topic. And I know that I have to, um, because my service to others requires that I know what I'm doing. My service to God requires that I understand what I'm up against. And so that means knowing what these things mean. And so that when people ask, I would be, oh, okay, I have not only a resource, but I understand what you're asking. And so I would say that it's that's not just one, but I think that those are the ones that come to my mind. And yeah, I hope I didn't offend anybody if I forgot them. Yeah.
What's next for your ministry? I know you talked about a book, you talk about,
Yep.
seminary and things like that. So what's really next for your ministry there?
The biggest thing is the book. And I haven't even announced anything about it yet, just that I'm writing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the biggest project I've ever done in my life. And so when people realize what it's about, I think they'll see, oh, it wasn't just like I didn't just write to write. I did not want to
Yeah.
write. I did not want to. And this is weird because when you get a platform, all of a sudden people are like, oh, write a book, write a book. I'm like, about what? I'm not going to write a book just to write a book. I mean, I am not. It's so important. Like if you want to do a money grab and write a book, no, that's not for me. I have to really want to write. And I really did not. And until it just hit me last year, something really hit me hard last year. And I'm like, why has nobody written about this? I'm like, okay, this is a book. I can't just make a video about this. This is a book. I went a little crazy last year because writing a book is crazy. Like authors are a little nuts. It's a lot of work. And I did boots on the ground work. And so that is probably the next big thing. And I'm just waiting on pins and needles, waiting to just being able to talk about that and get it out. Because that's what I love. That's what I love about, I don't know, like the topics is that I mean, I choose them, but when you're really genuinely interested in them, it's just such a different feel. And I think that that's really what this is that it's more than a passion project. I don't know, it's more than that. It's a fun project. Like it's something I'm genuinely enjoying, but I really think that everybody needs to know about. So that's the biggest thing coming up. Yeah.
So how can people listening make a difference in their communities for the kingdom while having a family or full-time job? As that's something that you're doing, and I'm trying to do as well. Like these, I think people think of YouTube as the end all be all, but like as you've shared, or it's like you're doing more than just YouTube, or not just
Mhm.
YouTube. Like it's not just about the public views and stuff. Like what can you tell people to encourage them to be ambassadors for Christ?
I want to speak to the people that every single day are not noticed, but are doing the work. I I think it's so silly sometimes how this all works out. I'm like, I enjoy YouTube. I had fun. I feel like I can do a lot of things, but the only reason why I know anything is because of other Christians who I'm standing on the shoulders of. and they're the ones at home with their families. And I think that you're right, like there's an element of, oh, I need to be doing that, but it's not necessarily for everybody. Some people pursue it, some people don't. I didn't. I kind of leaned into it when it started happening, and I have no regrets. Like, this is a responsibility, I feel. But they have a responsibility too. We all do. And what is the movie that just came out for King and Country on Unsung Heroes? I haven't seen it, but it's about family. And there's a saying that your family isn't in the way, they are the way. And I love that because I think that this is kind of the perspective I have with my girls. I'm like, you guys are the work.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
This is
actually
fun.
one of my favorite
Yeah.
quotes from C.S. Lewis. It says, yeah, they children. Oh man, it's something that like,
It's basically that. Children
yeah,
aren't in the way, they are the way.
yeah,
Yeah. And
and
that's what it's about. I mean, you're having this whole movement in our country, and here's the thing is that there's thousands of them. There's one of me. If I have 270,000, 500 million subs, whatever, that they're the ones that are choosing what they're going to do with that information. Like, what are you going to do about it? Because you're talking about, you're taking in this information. Well, now what? Are you teaching this to your children who are going to school? Are you applying this in your church? We would be very surprised how many churches need this information too and are hungry for it. And it's everywhere. Like, there's so many good churches and good pastors out there. I mean, maybe I'm kind of everywhere in this regard, but my point is that you don't need to have a platform or do anything in that regard to feel like you're making a difference, because you are in one line of like a domino effect of people that are all part of this like tapestry of the gospel being preached. This is what I think of every single day. I think of the martyrs. I think of those that are imprisoned for their faith right now. Voice of the Martyrs. They're on, I follow them on Instagram. Nobody knows who those people are, but they're over there with a, medal around their Bible in case they get shot, and the people, we don't hear about them. I think of them every day because I'm thinking of the pastor in the middle of nowhere right now who has weared out the floor by his desk because he prays so much for his congregation. And they are the people that are going to go out, and he doesn't think he's doing anything, right? He doesn't think he's making much of a difference. I think that's just the wrong perspective. I think that we need to be in the moment, do what we've been called to do. This may not last forever, and I'm fine with that. I have the perspective that I may not be on YouTube someday, and I'm fine with that. My calling isn't my calling. My gifting in that regard is not necessarily YouTube. I'm riding the wave, but I'm not trying to make a name for myself in that regard. I really want to help people. I really want to show them things and teach them things that I'm surprised that a lot of Christians don't know. And we need to have these conversations. And I'm just not afraid to say that. And I think that's why there's a platform there where people might find that refreshing. But I'm here to tell them, lean into it too. Like, don't shy away. How to have a good understanding of your own faith, of your own beliefs is very crucial. And we've lost that, especially in the younger crowd. It's just kind of like let's sit and see what we can learn and apply to our lives, which is great. We need that. But we are in a spiritual war over here, and we need to be able to be equipped. And I think that there's a need and a space for that. And so all that to say, bringing it full circle, I want to just kind of put a spotlight on the pastors, the preachers, the teachers, because that's why I know anything, are the people that have taught me, people that have written books that I've read, that I repeat, they're not known. I have seminary professors. I repeat so many things in seminary that people don't realize that I've learned from brilliant men, things like that. And so it's like, it's not really all for waste. And then you have children that are going to go out and repeat these things. And so It's just being in that moment and doing the best you can with what you have been given, knowing what to say no to, but also knowing what to say yes to.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's so important. Yeah, I think we're just in such a weird place,
Mm-hmm.
I guess, with culture and media where people are obsessed with the visible metrics. Like people like, oh, I'm on YouTube, I have a platform for myself, and it's like they're coveting this platform. And as many, like I've always said, like if Paul, the Apostle Paul, were here today, obviously he'd be on YouTube. He'd be on any platform sharing the gospel as much as he could, like,
Mm-hmm. I,
but
I want
I,
more Christians to get on YouTube. Like, that's the thing, too, is that uh, we all have so many things that we're so good at uniquely. I look
yeah,
like Ruslan. Do you know who Ruslan is? Like, do you
yep,
watch his
yeah,
channel?
yeah,
That guy's like a triple threat because not only is he musically talented, but the dude's an artist, right? But he is so good at talking with people, getting people on his channel, and he's really extroverted. But I mean, that's good if you're trying to, reach people for Christ and stand firm. And then you look at other people online. Mike Winger, come on now. That dude did not go looking for a platform, and people are hungry for what he has to say, and he doesn't shy away from the truth. um, and he's a pastor, and it's just that's so good, and so many others. It's like you have Christians who are talented that are hungry, right? They're hungry to get it out, but maybe they can't at their church or whatever. I think online ministry is a great outlet. I think it's a great way. That's what you're doing, and I think it's wonderful. I think we need more of that. Sorry, I cut you off, but yeah, I was agreeing with you.
yeah. So, any advice that you would give for up and coming YouTube apologists or online creators that are specifically geared for Christ and Christian ministry?
Just do it for His glory. Let me tell you something. Here, it's hard. You got to really keep your head out of the clouds. All right. Say you're a Christian who's getting a platform. You need to have people around you keeping you accountable. This is really important. Even in churches, it's a red flag if you are a pastor and you are just calling all the shots and you're surrounded by yes men. And the most dangerous part is that if you are one of those pastors or people or online or whatever, and you might think you do, but do you? I've been called out a few times lovingly by other content creators. We do this because we need to, right? Like you get it's not always easy, but it's all, man, thanks, man. I didn't know that was that or whatever it is. I'll take it down. That's thank you, right? Our posture should be, how do we keep accountable theologically, morally, all these things, and then posture ourselves knowing that what we do is an ambassador means that we represent Christ. We represent Jesus. And when we have that perspective, in other words, I'm saying all this because it's about your perspective. It can be very discouraging. Do not play the comparison game. Don't go to prom thinking, oh, her dress is so much prettier than mine. No, wear your dress. If it's plainer than everybody else's, it's your dress. And you walk in the room and you rock it, okay? If you have a small YouTube channel and you're loving it, do what you're doing. Share your stuff. Enjoy doing it. I think that that's a good thing. And I think what happens is we'll get a YouTube channel and we'll have it for like a year or two, and you're like, oh, so and so is growing so quickly. Oh man, their video got this many views. That's the wrong perspective. Yes, their video got so many views and it's such a good video. Like that's so good. It says a lot about where we're at when we're like, that's a yes, good for yes, I'm so glad that video took off. And so that's probably one of the biggest things, is that just don't play the comparison game in that regard. But also just grow where you're at. Greg Kokel says this all the time: bloom where you're planted. And I think that's just great. I think that that's wonderful. Because no matter where you grow, there's an element of responsibility that is unique to you. So keep yourself accountable. surround yourself with people that are going to build, not just build you up, but theologically challenge you, just accountability in that regard, and encourage you. And don't play the comparison game. So that might be a long explanation, but that's basically right off the top of my head what I'd have to say.
Yeah, no, that's so great. Yeah, I love that quote you talked about with Greg. Like,
Yeah.
just be where you're at, and I think so many people,
Yeah.
they take that for granted, where they're looking to the next place after that, or even looking back, to be in bondage from Egypt, or at least we had, there was some kind of like normalcy. But I think the most important thing is steward whatever God has given you, and that kind of goes back
Yeah.
to, with the talents and giftings that God has given us. It's like,
That's a good point. Yes. Yes, steward it.
yeah, like how can you expect God to bless you or take you to the next place that He has for you when we can't even steward the good things, the giftings that God has
Well, and we
given us?
assume that blessings from God mean popularity. And this is a whole other thing, is that good fruit needs to be defined, because everybody thinks
Mm-hmm.
that all numbers are good numbers. That is not always the case. No, no, no. Um, you think, oh, God is blessing them, their YouTube channel is blowing up, but how's their theology? Because I
Yeah.
see a lot of garbage theology out there that has
Mm-hmm.
a lot of views on it. That does not mean God is blessing it. So I think the perspective on what that means, that was really well said. Yeah. With just opening up in that regard of knowing what it means to steward something well.
So thank you so much, Melissa, for coming on my channel and talking about New Age, New Thought, and your ministry. Where can people find you?
Yeah, so I'm everywhere: Facebook, Twitter, or X, whatever. It'll always be Twitter to me.
Yep.
Instagram, and then of course YouTube. And then they can just find it. It's my name, Melissa Dougherty. Oh, and then a website. I have a website. I keep forgetting about my website. Same name though, melissadougherty.co. So that kind of is the hub for everything. But yeah, that's basically where people could find me.
Awesome. I'll link everything below in my YouTube description. Thanks again so much, Melissa, for coming on.
For sure. Thanks for having me.